My name is Ray Miller. I've been here since 2005. I'm a professor in theater and dance. I direct and write plays and choreograph dances. For a while, I also served as the chair for our department and for the interdisciplinary studies program up at Watauga. Cecilia?
Yeah, thanks, Ray. Hi, my name is Cecilia Chan. I am a senior theater arts student with a concentration in design and technology, also pursuing a double minor in music and Chinese. I'm also involved in both the Honors College and the Watauga Residential College on campus. And this is my third year at App State.
Thank you, Cecilia. Okay, so I'm gonna talk for the first 8 minutes or less, and then Cecilia will take it over from there. So let me set the stage for you guys. It's 1970. You're 21 years old. Things are going crazy around the country because Nixon has invaded Cambodia, and there are protests going on all over the place, including your own campus. While there were maybe 400 or 500 people actually participating as protesters, there were several thousand that were in sympathy. I'm on my way from a theater class to a dance class. Usually I meet up with my girlfriend who was in the dance class, and then we walk over together. There is a building called the Journalism Building, and around that building there are National Guards, about 400 of them, and there are student protesters, and things are getting really, really heated. Bullhorns are being sent out by the general asking people to disperse. The students are yelling back and throwing objects at the National Guard. I couldn't find my girlfriend, so I was running around the building thinking she might be on one side or the other. As I got to one side of the building, all of a sudden I hear these shots going on. Bang, 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 bang. There were over 60 shots. And then this deafening silence, at the end of which you found out there were 4 students killed and 9 wounded. It scared, I was scared. I thought maybe my girlfriend might have been in the line of fire. Had I simply met her like we normally would have, then we both would have been in the line of fire. Most of the students who were shot or killed were on their way to a class or simply watching the protesting. Very few of the protesters were actually injured. Flash forward about 25 years to 1990. We're coming up on the 25th anniversary of this. I'm teaching at Georgia State University. There were many students there who knew of the event, but not necessarily a lot about it. And so I took about 2 years from 1988 to